Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Susie Roop and I work here at Rhodes Scholar. And it is my pleasure to host today's virtual lecture, Saving a Species, 50 Years of Conserving Mountain Gorillas. These virtual lectures are free and available not just to Rhodes Scholar participants, but they're available for anyone who loves to learn. So spread the word. This series of online lectures is critical to helping us pursue our not-for-profit mission of making learning accessible to as many lifelong learners as we can. That includes those who do not have the physical ability, the financial means, or the option to leave their homes to come join us on a program. And ultimately, this series would not be possible without the support of viewers like you who have funded this project through your generous donations. So please consider making a donation to Not-for-Profit Rhodes Scholar so that we can continue to provide educational experiences both in the virtual classroom and on our learning adventures around the world in the future. Visit www.rhodesscholar.org/give to show your support with a monetary donation. Every dollar helps. So while the Rhodes Scholar headquarters is based in Boston, we have offices, staff, and lecturers we hear from around the world. Today, you will be hearing from Dr. Tara Stoinski. Dr. Stoinski serves as President and CEO and Chief Scientific Officer for the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. She has studied gorillas for more than 25 years and is the author of over 100 scientific publications and books. Her work has been featured in numerous press outlets, including National Geographic magazine, CNN, and NPR. She holds degrees from Tufts University, the University of Oxford, and the Georgia Institute of Technology, and is an adjunct professor at Emory University. Dr. Stoinski also serves in a number of leadership positions within the conservation, primate, and academic communities. Before we begin, we have just a few quick notes. Dr. Stoinski will present for approximately 30 minutes, after which we will host a 10 to 15-minute question and answer session. During the session, you can submit your questions using the question and answer icon button at the bottom of your screen. Now, there are over almost 500 of you on watching live right now, so apologies if we do not get to your question, but we will certainly try to get through as many as we can. Should technical issues force you to miss any portion of this webinar, don't worry. We will be adding a recording of this to our online virtual lecture library. And finally, at the end of the Q&A and our time here together, you will be prompted to take a very short survey, just like you would on any Rhodes Scholar program. And we ask that you please take a few minutes to fill this out because your feedback is immensely helpful to us and will help us grow and improve this virtual lecture series. So without further ado, let's have a warm virtual welcome for Dr. Tara Stoinski.
Great. Thank you so much, Susie. It's really a pleasure to be here today with you and with the Rhodes Scholar program. So I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you about my job, which is really the best job in the world, I always say. I get to lead the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund, which for more than 50 years has been on the ground in the forest every single day studying and protecting gorillas and also helping the people that live near their habitats. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my background before starting on telling you about these amazing creatures. While this isn't a photo of me, it certainly could be. I grew up loving animals and wanted to be a vet and practiced on many an animal just like this. When I went to college, I planned to go to vet school and then had the opportunity to go to Africa, first to study jackals, which you see here on the screen. And when I went to Africa for the first time, I really fell in love with studying animal behavior and decided that this was what I wanted to do with my life and the continent on which I wanted to work. And so I worked with gorillas for 8 years in captivity before I got to study them in the wild. And so this is one of the very first gorillas I met. This is Shinda. And the gorillas that we work with in Rwanda, and I'll tell you a lot more about the program in a minute, but they are what we call habituated, which means that they are accustomed to having people sitting near them. So they're used to us being around, as opposed to unhabituated gorillas, which if they heard a sound of humans, they would run away like most wild animals. So even though they're used to having us around, we still have to mind our manners, and each of these gorillas has their own personality. So I went out to meet Shinda one day. I was new. He immediately recognized me. And let's just say that Shinda didn't have the greatest personality. And so he decided to immediately put me in my place. And so he charged me. I was down on the ground because you're never supposed to run. And he was sniffing the back of my neck. And I had my hair in a ponytail. And I literally could feel the hairs on the back of my neck going up and down while he gave me a once over. And the guys in the group were like, Tara, don't worry, he's just, looking at you. But knowing that this is what an angry silverback looks like, this is what I was envisioning was poised right over my spinal column. So luckily, despite this kind of scary introduction to mountain gorillas, it didn't frighten me away. And I went on and now have worked with this organization for close to 20 years. But my journey would not be possible without this person, who I hope many of you are familiar with. This is Dr. Dian Fossey, who in 1967 went to study the then unknown mountain gorillas. And although she went there as a scientist, she very quickly fell in love with her subjects. And in particular, she fell in love with this individual, Digit. So Digit was one of the first gorillas to accept Dian Fossey into Gorilla Society. And he was playful, and as you can see it here, is kind of imitating her. And unfortunately, when he was just 12 years old, Digit was killed by poachers. And this really devastated Dian. And she went on to start the Digit Fund. So this was an organization that she started in Digit's honor to raise money to go out and conduct anti-poaching patrols. So you can see her here with some of the anti-poaching patrol members that she hired. They're removing snares from the forest. So people would go in to set snares, usually not for gorillas, but unfortunately the gorillas would get caught in them and then could die as a result of the injuries. They would go in to graze their cattle, which was destroying this very limited habitat that gorillas had left. So she started what she called active conservation, and she made a lot of enemies in the process. And in 1985, she was unfortunately killed in her cabin up in the mountains in Rwanda. And she was buried up there next to her best friend, Digit. You can see both of their graves here. Now, the organization at that time could have very much died, but it didn't. It continued on and was renamed in 1992 in her honor. So the Digit Fund that Dian started is now this organization, the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. And I think that she would be very honored to know and proud to know that this little, camp that she started up in the volcanoes of Rwanda 50 plus years ago still lives on in this group of people, which is the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. So this is our team in Rwanda. We have over 210 staff. And we are now the world's longest running and largest organization dedicated entirely to the conservation of gorillas. And so it's my real pleasure to now tell you a little bit about the work that we do and also these amazing animals that we are protecting. So I just want to start off with a little kind of Gorilla 101 and tell you a bit about where we work. So hopefully you can see my cursor. So this area right here is called the Congo Basin. It's the second largest standing tropical rainforest left on the planet. And this is the only place where gorillas are found. And there are two types of gorillas. They're the ones that live in West Africa, and there's two of those. And there are the ones that live in Eastern Africa, and there are two of those. And this is where we work. Okay, so I'll move you over to this map. So here's Rwanda. Here's the Democratic Republic of Congo. So in Rwanda, we work with what is called the mountain gorillas, and they live in this tiny little area right here that borders 3 countries. This is the Rwandan side. There's a little bit here on the Ugandan side and a little bit here on the Congolese side. And this background that I have here actually reflects the type of habitat. So where you see dark green, like here and here, it's forest. And where you see light green, it's agricultural land. So what you'll immediately notice is that they hardly have any habitat left. It's actually less than 800 square kilometers left on the planet for these animals. We also work with another type of gorilla called the Growers gorilla. They are only found in Eastern Congo. And as you can see, there's lots and lots of green space here. So the good news is we still have lots of healthy habitat left for Growers gorillas. And we work, unlike in mountain gorilla, in Rwanda, where all the mountain gorillas live in a national park and so have some level of protection, we actually work in community forests. So these are forests that are not formally protected. They basically are people's backyards and they have gorillas in them. And so we work with the local communities there to help them ensure that these forests stay intact and the gorillas are protected. So that's where we work. Now I just want to tell you a little bit about the animals that I have dedicated my entire career to studying. So this is a typical kind of gorilla family. You'll see they lots of different individuals. They can range anywhere from 2 to up to 65 animals in a family, although the average is about 10. And you'll see a couple of different sizes and shapes here. I'll just point out, these are the silverbacks. So a silverback is basically an adult male gorilla. Every male becomes a silverback. So the process of maturation for a male gorilla is when they reach a certain age, the saddle of their back turns silver. Just like in humans, you know, males get broader shoulders and grow facial hair. And then you'll see lots of females and kids kind of all around here. Here's a female back here. She looks like she has a kid on her back, and all these individuals. So this is a typical gorilla family. And as I mentioned, they're led by usually one dominant male. So one silverback is in charge of the whole group. They're kind of the glue that keeps the group together. The strongest relationship outside of the mother and infant bond is the relationships between females and silverbacks. So here you'll see some females resting, taking a nap on the back of a silverback. And then the other key bond within the gorilla family is the mother-infant bond. So this is a mom with a brand new infant. Infants are born at only 4 pounds, so much smaller than us. And when you consider that a fully adult male gorilla weighs 400 pounds, that's quite a growth trajectory. And they're vegetarians, so they do all of that while just eating plants. Females have 1 kid at a time usually, and they are pregnant for about 8.5 months, and they have babies every 4 years. So these babies are totally dependent on their mom. Here's one that's a little bit older. As they get a little bit bigger, they'll ride on their mom's back, and then at about 3 years of age, they'll be weaned, and their mom will get pregnant again. So they will not get pregnant while they're nursing an infant. So incredible investment by these moms and their babies. And so this is just a quick video showing you a gorilla family. You can see here's a silverback surrounded by a lot of females and probably older kids. And they're walking up in this high elevation forest in Rwanda. This is Pablo's group, which is one of the largest groups we work with. So here's another silverback coming through. And silverbacks are, once the kids are 3-4 years old, they're often babysitters. So you'll see all of these kids running after dad or just another silverback in the group. And then here come some females following as well. I think there's some more kids coming, we'll see. Yep, here they come. So there's a female or an older blackback with a bunch of kids. There's a mom with her baby on her back. So very cohesive groups. These guys are together all day long. Every night they build a nest around each other, and each gorilla has their own individual nest that they sleep in. They build it on the ground. So that's just a quick look at gorillas. And in terms of what a gorilla's day is involved, so in the morning, they'll wake up in their nest. This is actually an afternoon resting session, so there's no nest to see here. But very typical, all sleep around each other. They do spend a lot of their day sleeping. You can imagine if you eat salad all day, 60 pounds of salad, you need a lot of time to digest it. So a lot of time sleeping, a lot of time eating. As I mentioned, they're vegetarians, so they have to spend a lot of time to get enough bulk in to feed a 400-pound individual. And then certainly for the kids, they spend a lot of time playing. So kind of a typical gorilla day, wake up, feed, take a nap, feed, play, and then go to sleep. So pretty idyllic. So I just wanted to tell you a few of my favorite gorilla stories and one of the reasons that I love them so much. So this is Fascia. Fascia is a 4-year-old female in Isabukuru's group. And so every day our trackers go out. We protect 10 gorilla families in Rwanda, which is actually half of the gorilla families that remain. So every day they go out and they check on every individual, just like you might come home and make sure that your partner or your kids or your animals are all accounted for. We go out and we look for every gorilla. So one day our trackers noticed that Fascia was missing. So they went to look for her and they saw that she unfortunately had been caught in a snare. So we were able to get the snare off of her foot and reunite her with her group, but her foot was pretty badly injured from the snare and it took her a long time to heal. So a few weeks later, we came across her group when we were there with them for the day, and they were trying to cross this river here that you see. And Fascia was really struggling because her foot was injured still, it was still healing. And so what you can see is that her older sibling, Ichioro, was waiting for her on the other side and encouraging her to cross the river. And we got this incredible sequence of photos of her crossing, and then once she made it to the other side, getting a big hug from her sister. And in addition, her whole family was waiting there for her. So very much like human society and human families, very close-knit, they support each other and take care of each other. One of my other favorite stories is about their intelligence. So this is Cansby. He's a very famous gorilla. He was actually named by Dian Fossey because she had misidentified his mother as a male. And one day she showed up and this male had given birth and she said, well, that can't be. And so he got the name Cansby, and he's one of our most famous gorillas. He passed away a few years ago. But here you can see him babysitting like I had told you about before. Males often babysit while the females are off feeding. And so one of our research assistants was watching him, and every time a kid would come near him, he would do this mildly aggressive vocalization called a pig grunt. He would go, ah, ah, ah. And the babies would all move away from him. And she thought this was quite odd. It was very out of character. So she tried to get a little bit closer to see if he was hurt, and he made the vocalization at her. So she moved away and just said, oh, he must be having a bad day. And eventually the gorillas left the area and she went to follow them. And when she went to follow them, she saw that he was sitting next to a snare. And so by aggressively vocalizing at the kids, he kept them away from the snares. A lot of time the older gorillas will recognize snares, but younger gorillas will not. And so he kept those babies away from the snare. And she felt like he was also keeping her away from the snare. So again, incredible intelligence and incredible sense of family and caring among these animals. So given all that, given that they're so majestic, they're so like us, they share 98% of our DNA, we can see ourselves reflected in them, you know, why after 50 years is our work conserving them still needed? And so unfortunately, as you may or may not know, we are in what is considered the 6th mass extinction crisis. This is an article that came out about a year ago, that nature is currently in the worst shape in human history, with 1 million species right now at the risk of extinction. And unfortunately, gorillas are included in that. So if we just look quickly at what's happening to gorilla populations today, you remember I told you that we work with the 2 populations of gorillas that live in East Africa. Here are the mountain gorillas, the ones I was just showing you that are found in those national parks, those small little parks in Rwanda, Congo, and Uganda. And luckily, this arrow shows that their numbers are increasing. They've actually increased by about 23% in the last few decades. But what's frightening is how many of them are left. 1,000 individuals left on the planet, and none of them in captivity. They're only found in Africa. The scary situation, a particularly scary situation, is the Growers gorillas. So these are the ones that live in those beautiful forests in Congo that I showed you. We have more of them left. We estimate about 3,800 of them. Again, none in zoos, only found in the wild. But what is really scary is this. They are in a rapid decline. We have lost almost 80% of them in the last 20 years. So that means 4 out of every 5 Growers gorillas has disappeared from the planet in the last 20 years. And that largely is because of direct poaching. For the mountain gorillas, it's things like habitat loss. So this is the park in Rwanda where we work. And what you will see is there's no buffer zone. So you've got people living here, and then this is the park here. And so literally these gorillas live in a very small park surrounded by one of the highest human population densities in Africa. And unfortunately, these people are also very poor. So this is a family going to collect water. You can see the park in the background behind them. So they depend a lot on the park for resources, whether it be food. They go in to hunt. And again, in Rwanda where we work, they don't hunt gorillas, but they catch snares that they set snares for other animals that individuals like Fascia can get caught in. Unfortunately, in Congo, where the poverty is even worse, people do actively hunt gorillas and other animals for food because there really are no other sources of protein. So on top of this background of, extreme poverty, limited habitat, poaching, we now have COVID-19, which is presenting yet another further crisis for the gorillas. In both the countries where we work, the largest threat has been the challenges to the local human populations. So as COVID has hit, it has taken away very important sources of revenue. So for example, in Rwanda, the #1 source of foreign revenue for the entire country is tourism to see the gorillas. So here you can see tourists that are visiting the gorillas. And as you can imagine with COVID-19, this source of revenue has completely disappeared. So people have lost their livelihoods, whether they were a park guide or a porter that would help people carry their stuff into the forest. All of that revenue is gone. And on top of that, these countries are experiencing very high inflation, so their cost of living has gone up incredibly. And we are really seeing the impacts of this. Everyone I talk to in conservation is talking about the increases in poaching. Unfortunately, we had the first mountain gorilla poached in almost a decade back in June. This didn't happen in Rwanda, but it happened in Congo. And they weren't hunting gorillas, they were hunting other animals, but they ran into this individual, Rafiki, and he scared them and they killed him. So it's just an example of what having hunters in the forest can do. But then COVID presents an extreme conservation threat for great apes because unfortunately, they have, because of their genetic similarity to us, they have the same exact receptor system that we have, meaning that COVID-19 can affect them the same way it can affect us. And I love this line down here, which is actually one I had shared, which said, unlike us, gorillas are really bad at social distancing. They don't know to stay away from each other. And so if COVID were to get into the population, it could really be devastating. So with that backdrop, how do we work to conserve these animals? And our commitment is that we never leave, no matter what. We have been in Rwanda now for 53 years. We've been there through Rwanda's genocide and all the security after the fact. And certainly COVID-19 is not going to scare us away either. Every single day, 365 days a year, our teams are in the forest protecting individual gorillas and their families like you've seen. We study how they live and what role they play in their larger ecosystem. And we also work very hard to teach future scientists in Africa how to do the same and how to help local populations understand the value of these animals. And what I wanted to do is bring you to Rwanda and let you hear directly from our director, Felix Ndagijimana, about kind of our work and how we organize it. So hopefully this video will work.
Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund International is dedicated to the conservation and protection of gorillas and the habitats in Africa. To be able to accomplish our mission, we have developed an integrated conservation model which has 4 pillars. The first one is daily protection. Daily protection is done through the presence of our staff in the park. So we have trackers who go to the park 365 days a year. Their work is basically to monitor the gorillas, to follow each and every gorilla groups that we are in charge of. Also, we have 2 dedicated anti-poaching teams who are in the forest also every day, removing snares and other threats to gorillas and other animals of the park. Second one is scientific research. We are the world's longest running research center. We have been studying mountain gorillas for over 50 years. Our research work doesn't focus only on the gorillas, but also biodiversity of the park. So we want to be able to understand the gorillas and their ecosystem. The information that comes out of the research that we do really informs conservation policies in this country. Pillar number 3 is training of future conservation leaders. We're able to reach over 400 students from higher learning institutions in Rwanda The work that we do is basically to provide skills to young scientists that would really enable them to continue the work of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. Our fourth pillar is helping communities. This is important because we know effective conservation requires support of local communities. We work closely with communities who live close to the gorilla habitat, and we support their education, health, and also provide alternatives, because some of these communities are affected by poverty and they depend on park resources. So we want to be able to provide alternatives so that they don't go in the park. It is such a great honor to be the first Rwandan director of Carisote Research Center, to follow in the footsteps of Dian Fossey and all these other great scientists, all these other great conservationists. But I'm not the only Rwandan who works at Carisote Research Center. In fact, 98% of all our staff are Rwandan.
So I hope you enjoyed seeing Felix, and I just want to reiterate what he said. We have over 210 staff in Africa, and 98% of them are African. So we're very much an African-led and run organization on the ground, which we're very proud of. And I just wanted to show you, so these are this is a quick sort of just photo of the groups that we protect in Rwanda. I mentioned earlier that we protect 10 groups. There are another 10 that are protected by the Rwandan government. So wonderfully, every single family of gorillas that lives in Rwanda is protected. And these are just some of the cast of characters that our groups get to see every single day. And each of them has their own dedicated team of trackers that go out and, like I mentioned, check on them and make sure they're doing well. And the great news is that despite all the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to the human populations, the gorillas overall are doing quite well. And we are in fact in the middle of a baby boom. So I just wanted to show you some quick photos. We've had 6 babies born since May, one of them on Father's Day. So that was a great gift to the dad of that group. And so you can just see some of them here. This one I just want to mention quickly. She's one of my favorites. Her nickname is Fat. She has a very long Kenya-Rwandan name, and so her nickname is Fat. And she's here with her newborn, her 2-year-old, and her 5-year-old. So you may remember I said earlier, normally gorilla moms give birth about every 4 years. So Fat is really a superstar. She has done in 6 years what it would normally take a gorilla mom 4 years to do. So we have to figure out how to replicate her so we can have that population increase even faster. I wanted to just sort of end or talk about where we're going, because I think in these times where there's so much kind of doom and gloom happening, what's really exciting for us is we are expanding and looking to the future and how we can continue this work. What is our next 50 years like? And I'm thrilled that we are in the process right now of building our first permanent home in gorillas, which will really build a future, our first permanent home in Rwanda, which will build a future for gorillas and conservation in the region. And this is something we've wanted to do for more than 20 years. Ever since the genocide in '94, we've not been based up in the forest like you saw Diane, but we've had an office building that you saw Felix walking in front of in town. So we've been far from the forest, far from the gorillas. So we have started building this lovely campus. It's truly a campus. I'll show you some more photos of it in a minute. But you know, we didn't want to just build ourselves a home. This has to have a bigger mission than just where our staff live and work out of. And so the mission of our new campus is to use these amazing gorillas and all that we've learned and all the stories about them as an entry point to bring people into conservation activism. And so every stakeholder we work with, whether it be a student, a government official, a partner, a community member, a tourist, a visiting researcher, they all have a place on this campus where they can engage in meaningful learning about gorillas, about conservation, and about the importance of both. So this is a quick video I wanted to show you. This is an aerial view. So these are the 3 big buildings. We have an education center for all of the programming we do with Rwandan, young Rwandan students in university and beyond. This is a public exhibit where people can come and learn about our work, learn about gorillas. This is a purpose-built research lab. So for the first time ever, we won't be analyzing gorilla poop samples in our kitchen. And then we're doing a huge reforestation project. We're planting over 250,000 native species on what used to be agricultural land. So reforesting this area just outside the park. You can see the park here in the background. So moving ourselves back up to the communities that we work with and back up near the gorillas. And what we're really excited about, in addition to what this will do for conservation and our work, is that it will have a huge impact on these local communities. We're doing a construction approach that's called local fabrication. So it's all about hiring locally and using local materials. So more than 1,200 people in Rwanda will be employed as part of this project. We're promoting gender equity, so 50% of the construction workforce is female, or sorry, 35% of the construction workforce is female, and 50% of the leadership positions on the project are female. So really, it's not just about the project in the long term, but how can building this campus really affect these communities that live near the park. So I wanted to end with talking about why gorillas. You know, some people say to me, well, Tara, this is great. It sounds like you have such a fun job and you clearly love it. But when there are so many challenges out there in the world today, why is conserving gorillas important? And I think, to me, what we've seen with the pandemic has really highlighted why conservation in general is critical, not just to conserving something like gorillas, but ultimately to conserving ourselves. And I just want to, again, show a quick little video that we put together to try and explain why gorillas matter. So just to follow up on this theme, you know, you've heard me mention, and it said it there, that gorillas live in this Congo Basin, which is the second largest standing rainforest on the planet. And really what these forests represent are the lungs of the planet. They are one of our most important natural defense against climate change. Because as you know, trees absorb carbon dioxide and let out oxygen. And so I think this picture is a great one, that these forests represent the lungs of the planet, and we can think of the gorillas as the gardeners of these planets. So by having them there, they're keeping these forests very healthy. And so ultimately, by conserving gorillas and the larger biodiversity, we're helping ourselves, because we need these forests for our health as well. So I love to end my talks with what is actually the final quote of Dian Fossey before that she wrote in her diary the night before she was killed. And that is, when you realize the value of life, you dwell less on what is past and concentrate more on the preservation of the future. And so I want to thank you again for taking the time to learn a little bit about my world and the gorillas. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in seeing what these guys are doing, please go to our website. You can sign up for our newsletter, or you can follow us. We're very active on social and posting updates from the field, whether it be a baby born or something interesting happening in the group. As I said, we're with them every single day, and we'd love to have you learn more. And with that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stoinski. That was wonderful. We'll now start our Q&A session. So again, if you have questions for Dr. Stoinski, you can submit them using the question and answer icon at the bottom of your screen. I see a whole slew of questions right now, so I've written some down. So we'll get started, but please continue to ask your questions. So Miles asks, what is the lifespan of the mountain gorilla if it's not affected by disease or an accident or some other force?
That is an excellent question. And, you know, we have been here for 53 years now, and we're just starting to answer this because when Dian Fossey first got there, gorillas were being heavily poached. And so we didn't know what the natural lifespan is. But the oldest gorilla, male gorilla that we've had was Cantsby, who I showed you earlier, and he lived to be 37. And the oldest female gorilla that we've had was a female named Poppy. She just died last year and she lived to be 43. Interestingly, in captivity, gorillas can live much longer. We know of gorillas that have lived to be almost 60 in captivity, but in the wild, their lives are tougher and their lifespan is shorter.
Thank you for that. And we've gotten quite a few questions about this topic. So many of our viewers today are curious what types of gorillas are in the zoos, and why aren't mountain gorillas bred in captivity?
Yeah. So of the 4 types of gorillas in the wild, only one is found in zoos, and that's called a Western lowland gorilla, and they're from the western part of Africa. There were mountain gorillas brought into zoos, but in very small numbers back in the, in the 50s and 60s, and they just really didn't keep enough in, and they didn't know enough about them to keep them alive, and so they died. And once everyone realized how endangered they were, they didn't want to be bringing more animals out of the wild. And even the gorillas that you see in zoos, 98% of them have been born in zoos. So zoos haven't taken gorillas out of the wild since the early 1970s. But only one of the 4 are in zoos. Only one of the 4 types are in zoos, and they're called Western lowland gorillas. They look very different. They live in hotter climates, so their hair is really short. They've got a lot more red in their face and other things.
Okay, great, thank you. And this next question kind of ties into that. Stan asked, what are the specific differences between the Grauer and the mountain gorillas?
Great question. So Grauer's gorillas are almost essentially unstudied. So I mentioned very early on this idea of habituation, where the gorillas are used to us being there so we can get really close. We can't actually do that at our field site in Congo. We don't want the gorillas to lose their fear of humans because they're hunted. So we actually follow them one day behind. So there's always one day between us and them. We're still learning really valuable things about what they eat by finding what they drop on the ground, how they're ranging, what their group size is, because they build those nests that I told you about. But the biggest difference appears to be how they look. They live in a different type of forest, so they're not quite as shaggy as the mountain gorillas. Their diet has a lot more fruit in it. And ultimately that then impacts how big their groups can be. So their groups are much smaller than the mountain gorilla groups. And usually they only have one adult male in a group, where you saw with the mountain gorillas in that one series, you might have 4 or 5 adult males. So those are the primary differences. If I were to show you 2 photos, you might not be able to tell the difference, but for us, it's pretty obvious just from being familiar with looking at gorilla faces.
Yeah. Cool. It's funny that you mentioned about the dominance being one of the differences, because we have a question from Lori who asks, do the mountain gorillas ever have a fight for dominance when you say you've chosen your dominant silverback and then another one might come in and try to take that power? Does that happen?
Oh, completely. Particularly, we see it a lot in these groups in Rwanda where there are these multiple males. So as an example, Titus's group right now, there are 3 silverbacks in the group. And there's a female Karuti. She has a 4-year-old. So for the last 3 years, she wasn't breeding with anyone because she was nursing, and the females won't breed when they're nursing. But she recently weaned her, and everyone got along fine. It was great. Happy family. She recently weaned her kid and has started cycling again. And now, the males are fighting pretty much daily to figure out who's going to be dominant and who's going to be able to eventually reproduce with her. So we do see these younger males, as they mature, start to challenge the dominance of the older males. But what's wonderful is oftentimes once they've taken over, that younger male has taken over dominance, he'll let the older male stay in the group, and they'll act very much as like an elder statesman. They'll still carry a lot of power and a lot of weight. They're just not actively breeding the same way they were before.
Okay, thank you. Priscilla asks, do the mountain gorillas have any other threats beside, say, poachers or other predators besides poachers, or habitat loss, or the climate change that's affecting the area? It's
an excellent question, and sadly, really the only threat to gorillas are humans. So they don't have really any natural predators. Occasionally a leopard might be able to take a small one, but because they live in these super cohesive groups and they defend each other, it's very hard for that to happen. So we are unfortunately their greatest threat, but we are also their greatest hope. And you know, one of the things I love about the mountain gorilla story is that it shows there's so much bad news about nature, but it just shows when a concerted effort is made, when the government prioritizes conservation, when NGOs stay the course, that we can change the tide. Dian Fossey thought mountain gorillas would be extinct before the year 2000, and instead they're the only great ape on the planet that's increasing in number. So amazing conservation success story.
Yeah. Wow. That is great news.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting question here from Brian, and it ties into that idea of being one day behind a gorilla so that they're still, you know, scared of humans enough to be able to stay away from them.
Right.
But say there's a medical issue and you're aware of it, do you intervene? Or, you know, if a female gorilla is going through childbirth, do you intervene if there are any complications?
Yeah. That's a great question. So for the growers gorillas, the ones where we follow a day behind, there's no medical treatment available for them. For the mountain gorillas, there are medical interventions that can happen. So for example, to get that snare off that Fascia had, that has to be a medical intervention. But the policy of the government is that interventions happen only in life-threatening emergencies, and generally if they're human-induced. So like a snare is human-induced. A lot of times if they get a respiratory virus, we think of that as probably having been transmitted to them by humans. So they might get an antibiotic shot. But for like a labor situation or anything like that, there would not be an intervention. We do want, you know, the best genes to continue to propagate, and we do want them to still be wild animals, but it's definitely a very different, it's sort of an intermediary. It's not as wild as Congo is, but it's certainly, they're still wild animals that fight and can choose where they go. And, but they do have a little bit of veterinary support, yes.
Okay. So that actually, you made that distinction between the grower and the mountain gorilla, and, you know, grower, you follow one day behind. Mountain gorilla, there's a little bit of wiggle room or a little space to have that interaction. So Pat asked, do gorillas ever, the mountain gorillas, ever engage with their trackers who are going out each day, or is that a very fine line that they're walking? It sounds like it might be that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And certainly in Dian Fossey's time, I can't remember if I showed a picture of her like this, but you know, she loved to interact with the gorillas, and particularly the young ones are very curious. They, you know, want to look at your shoelaces and under your backpack and all of that. We didn't really understand at the time the susceptibility that they would have to our respiratory viruses. So we definitely do not interact with the mountain gorillas at all. We try and stay 7 meters away from them, because that in theory is if you were to cough and not cover your mouth, how far that could travel. So it's very different, and we want to be a fly on the wall. You know, as scientists, we want to see what they do, and we don't want it to be influenced by us. But it's definitely hard. Because the gorillas, while I'll respect that 7 meter boundary, the gorillas often won't. And you'll sometimes be in a place where you can't move. You've got vegetation all around, and the gorillas will be walking by, and you just kind of have to stand there while they move past. So sometimes you get closer than you want.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, and I think this is kind of a fun one. Barbara asked, how did gorillas get their names? How do you decide, you know, what the names are of these gorillas that you get to interact with safely from a safe distance?
Yeah, that is a fun question. So in Dian's time, she actually named them. So for example, there was one named Uncle Bert, and that was named actually after her uncle. There was one named Flossie that was named after her aunt. I told you the story about how Cansby got his name. But what's wonderful now is that there is a process every year. It's actually usually the first Friday of September. This year it probably won't happen because of COVID, where the Rwandan government organizes an event to give all the baby gorillas born that year their name. It's usually attended by more than 15,000 people from the communities. The president of the country comes and speaks, and each of the gorillas is named by usually a dignitary. And they have 3 names to choose from. And each of those names have a meaning for what was going on in that gorilla family or in the country or in the world around that time. So for example, I named a baby in 2017. Her name is Matchabiri, and that was our 50th anniversary of being in Rwanda. So the name is actually the shortened version of Dian Fossey's nickname, which was Niria Matchabiri. So in honor of the 50th anniversary, that event that was happening, we named this baby Gorilla Matchabiri. So all of the names have a lot of meaning around them, and all of the babies get their name at the same time of year. So that's fun.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. It does sound like there's a lot of thought put into that.
It is. And it's just amazing to be in a place where 15,000 people have come to celebrate gorillas. When you think back that 50 years ago, you know, poachers were killing these animals, and now they're a national treasure and icon. So it's always one of my favorite days of the year.
That's really great, and a testament to the work that your organization is doing there.
Yeah.
Well, that is all the time that we have for today. I would like to thank you again, Dr. Tara Stoinski, for your presentation. Thank you to all of you who are watching for your questions. And should you wish to donate to Rhodes Scholar, again, the link to do so is www.rhodesscholar.org/give. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks again.